I had a very important conversation back in 1984. One of the finest mentors I ever had. I was teaching leadership as a 33-year-old person. I'd only been a first line supervisor, and here I am standing up in front of the class speaking to first line supervisors and managers. And he asked me, he said, "How do you teach leadership?" And I said, "Well, most managers are failing." And he goes, "I agree with you on that." He said, "So how do you teach leadership?" I said, "Well, I tell them to not do what their predecessors did, what their first line supervisor managers failed to do." I said, "Don't do that." And he started laughing. He said, "You obviously don't know the impact of modeling." I said, "What do you mean by that?" He said, "Modeling is so powerful that they cannot not do what their predecessors did unless they have positive role modeling by leaders." And he said, "So here's my question. What percentage of supervisors and managers are leaders?" I said, "Very few, maybe 10%, 20%. He said, "What percentage of managers are ineffective?" I said, "Well, then 80%. He said, "Who is the strongest instructor core? Who is going to be the people who have trained us, whether we realize it or not?" I said, "The ineffective managers." He said, "Bingo." He said, "We underestimate the impact of who, quote, raised us, not just in a family, but in the organization." He said, "The only way that we can overcome the legacy in our lives individually of ineffective managers and supervisors is to have positive leadership modeling." And he said, "Most organizations, that's not happening. We have very few leaders." I remember the expression, "You may cuss your daddy, but you're a lot like him." And one of the things I saw is I worked in correctional facilities and dealt with offenders, is that I would ask them, I said, "So what are you in here for?" And they would say, "Well, for domestic violence, I put my wife in the hospital." And I said, "Well, I'm sorry, but you shouldn't have done that." They said, "You know what?" And I actually had one person say this. He said, "I used to cry as a little boy and stand in between my mom and dad and say, 'Dad, please don't hit my mom. Stop hitting my mom.'" And he said, "I guess it's in my genes." I said, "No, it's not. It's in your training." Modeling trains us either to be effective or ineffective. And we see this work out all in every profession, in every relationship, that we, in a way, are a product of the men and women we've been around. And the military turns us around by giving them effective people to be their, quote, friends, to be their people who hold them accountable, so forth and so on. They do it better than any organization I've ever seen. But what do we do? What's the solution to not being like our predecessors? And the answer to that is we get some friends to help us practice what our managers didn't have, which is power of the group and modeling and encouragement and confrontation. Everybody knows leadership. I mean, I spoke for the Russians and everybody from around pretty much the world. Everybody intuitively understands leadership. Books basically say that are the books that are on leadership basically say the same thing, but they package it in different ways. You've got to encourage people, you have to confront people, da 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 da. The problem is the will and courage to do this once you get promoted. And why your predecessors failed is they tried to do this alone because they don't want to ask people because they felt embarrassed that they weren't sure what to do, because when they got promoted they realized that once they get in that office as a brand new supervisor, they don't know how to do this. Everybody knows that you should communicate with people, but what does that look like? And if you weren't regularly contacted by your supervisors and managers who checked on you, found out how you're doing, how's the new baby doing, what's happening with your mom's chemotherapy. You have not been taught how to do this as a supervisor and manager. So, what you've got to do is use the power of the group. You surround yourself with men and women who you ask them and tell them, we need each other to help practice this, because we all know what leadership is intuitively. We know we should communicate. We know we should deal with the problem employee. We know we should check on Bob when he's in the hospital. But we've not seen that practice. So we kind of understand it, but we've not seen it. So what you do is you surround yourself with other men and women who've not been trained to do this either. And you say, let us practice doing the right thing when it comes to communication, dealing with problem employees, dealing with gossip and slander, checking on Brenda as she goes through chemotherapy and all that. When you ask other people to help you, what you're doing is creating effective friends for you, and you are being an effective friend to them. The power of the group cannot be underestimated. That is one of the reasons the military is so effective at that, at the squad level and the platoon level, because they're surrounded by each other. And when one of us has a bad day, the other ones step up and say, no, get your head in the fight. Don't talk to people like that. And so you get a bunch of people around you and you ask them to help you. Here's some areas you need them to help you with. One, accountability. They've got to knock the crown off your head. What do I mean by that? The natural default position of when we get promoted is to go from we to me. We went from the group that we worked with where we thought about each other, and now we're a supervisor, and it is so tempting to think you're kind of special. And you, even though everybody else sees it, you don't see it, that you're now a me person. The enemy you will always face is the person in the mirror. The enemy is pride, and you have to have others in your life remind you this is not about you, this is about everybody. Remind each other and have you, this has got to be the one of the most important things you do. Remind each other that you work with people, not over them. You, being a supervisor doesn't make you a special person. It gives you a different responsibility, but it doesn't make you better than other people. So the first thing is to deal with the attitude issue. And, we say attitude is everything, and that is true. The next thing is applying leadership. Again, we all know what it is. Everybody knows you're supposed to communicate. So, how do we make sure we build relationships and trust? We together hold each other accountable to schedule intentional contacts with all of our staff to get to know them personally, and they know us as well. So we're reinforcing the we, not me concept by going out and spending time with people. And when you have other men and women in your life who say, you need to talk to some people this week, and on Friday, I'm going to ask you who you talk to, guess what you'll do? You'll talk to people. And after you do it, you see the value of this. But if they don't hold you accountable and throw you in the ring, so to speak, you will not do it. So, first off, accountability, then relationships to remind you that this is not about you, but about the men and women around you. The other thing they give you is wisdom. I love this great quote: none of us is as smart as all of us are. You can write the best report and rely on spell check, but if you give it to other people, they will see things you miss. And that's almost every decision we make, especially when we're making emotional decisions. We're going to make emotional decisions rather than the right thing to do. But when you have other people say, well, why don't you try to do this? Why don't we do, and they give you different ideas. And if you're willing to accept and listen to it, you'll come up with a lot better decisions. And what you do is always grounded in doing the right thing, not the convenient thing. You will be, quote, smarter not because you're smart, but because the group around you is smart. And that collective wisdom is very powerful. The other thing they're going to do is encourage you to encourage other people professionally and personally. Professionally, they remind you to tell Bob he did a good job on that project, that Susan did an amazing job on this, handling this very difficult situation. And they say, you've got to go say something. Good thoughts without follow through equal nothing. The other way you do this is encourage people personally. We are all people who have other things going on in our lives and our family and other aspects of our lives. And when you check on people who had a midterm exam in the graduate program that they were sweating last Wednesday and say, how did it go? You're building your belief that this is a person that goes beyond work. And you're encouraging them, that you're paying attention to them. And again, it's a reminder of that this is not about me, but we. And when you check on somebody whose wife is going through chemotherapy, who has to now have their mother move in with them, this encourages them, but it also again reminds you this is about them, not me. The other thing is, and this is very important, most leadership requires courage. The power of the group will help you have the courage when others are being mistreated. The superiority of numbers and people, again, putting you in the fight and optimally going with you to confront people, to defend people, to deal with issues where people are being mistreated cannot be underestimated. The last area is the confrontation of problem employees and managers. You remember Show Me Your Friends. You've got to make sure that the toxic friends in your organization are being dealt with and maintain the health of the unit, if not the organization. How we overcome the bad legacy we've had with our previous managers and supervisors is to get a bunch of men and women around us to help us practice what we all know as leadership. They are going to be your friends. And I want to remind you that your best friends that you'll ever have are ones that, as Solomon said, faithful are wounds of a friend. They'll hurt you when you need it, but also they give you the courage to do what you need to do. This is a deep relationship with others, and you will have lifelong friends with the men and women who threw you in the ring and kept you in there. That's what your predecessors didn't have. And that's why they failed, not because they were bad people, but by ourselves, we're not going to do this. We need our friends to keep us effective. And at the end of your career, you will look back on that time and realize how blessed you were to have men and women who helped you do this very difficult job called leadership. Thanks for joining us on the They to We Leadership podcast. If today's episode helped you think differently about management, take a moment to reflect and then apply it. Because real leadership isn't what you say, it's what you do next. And the real enemy is our pride and blindness on how we are really doing. Only with the help of others can we truly make an impact on those around us.